for Arlington Board of Arlington Arlington volunteer to bring and community have the opportunity to learn Canada. General have head Canada model or have sessions tonight. Each candidate to notes and notes to help and questions. I'd like to all and attend this forum to provide opportunity for information and of all Arlington School Board voters formed voting school question. So candidate introduce to go ground phone. All candidates ask this question. 60 respond. Candidate question but included time keep in the note and 10 seconds time it's state next speak time not cross interject other candidates may on to during time closing response with ensuring candidate opportunity for question or on the staff. Answer during the forum hold all till the end. Audience is will be greater island. The news of the forum of the approximately 20 people. Each can the opportunity to give to a in Arlington attending. We introduce and to occur. We have engaged Jen. This is Kathleen. This is Maria. For Kathleen. Thank you.
Everyone tonight. It is first, we do have much to also start on the
new class continue board members vote education and curriculum achievement. I will fiscal which is passed with a $1 million budget for time board for 20 years to be citizens for the care to all members and are being paid with Nexus pipeline revenue funds and are not being paid for with the operating tax dollars of our local care. I will continue with the repairs and improvements to our high school and all of our existing facilities as additional Nexus funds continue to become available. I will continue my support of all three of the
Thank you, Mrs. Gilbert. Mr. Jim, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you all. I appreciate that. I am Jim Horniak. I'm a Lexington resident for the past 12 years. My wife and family moved here in 2009 after I retired from the Air Force. I'm a 22-year veteran. While I was in the Air Force, I was involved with aircraft operations from repair all the way through I retired as production superintendent. I've handled employees from single to over 250, handled projects from snack bar funding to over $1 billion of inventory. My last job was ensuring that people, fuel, and equipment was shipped around the world 24/7, 365. So that's 14 years in my career. The other 8 years I was an instructor, I was a teacher, one of the best things I ever did. And when I retired, I was also a teacher for the Vivo Corporation, 10 technicians having installed commercial alarm systems and video surveillance systems. After that, I was a project manager for a small business in Greensburg, and then I went to the Tiffany Steel Corporation, where I was a senior training analyst for the Faircrest and Madison steel plants. Those activities that I've been involved in, I've never done the same thing. I've never been kind of pipeline career, but those things give me a broad experience with problem solving, with dealing with various people. And I'm glad to say that I do enjoy working with people. I enjoy streamlining and solving problems. And I think that's something that this district and this job can benefit from as well. So I do appreciate the chance to serve people. My current job, I'm a firefighter paramedic for Marlow Township, and I serve the surrounding communities as well. And I think, thank you. I think the basis of what I'm about is service, and I just appreciate the chance to be a candidate to serve this community in this school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mrs. Carol Huckers, 2 minutes.
I lived in Florida 3 years ago and found it inspired by a friend that I shared because of my high involvement in widely varied perspective of parenting. I'm a class of 1983 alum and the mother of a student, now a class of 2020 graduate for recent. Since 2009, I've been a volunteer member of the Martin Alumni Association Board of Trustees, which since our inception has awarded more than $950,000 in scholarships to graduating seniors. I was a classified substitute in the 2014-15 school year through December 2017. And I was a reporter for the Heartland News cover in Washington from November 2005 through December 2017. I believe that established relationships and the demonstration of servant leadership speaks louder than words. When you've walked alongside those you lead, the trust built and camaraderie established are hard to beat, and nothing is impossible. I'm running for re-election because Washington's very existence is at stake right now, and I can't walk away with Washington crisis. I still believe that if we put education first, we can all work together to bring excellence back to Washington. And I'm asking for your help and your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Huckers. Mrs. Kathleen Purdy, 2 minutes.
Good evening, Honorable Board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Kathleen Purdy. I'm a 29-year resident of Washington Township. My husband and I have raised 7 children who are all graduates of MIT. I believe that all 7 of them can attribute their success following graduation to their upbringing as well as to the staff at Washington and the education they received here. I served on the Board of Education for 8 years from January 2006 to December 2013 and as president for 4 of those years. I was honored to serve with outside administrators. Since leaving the board, I've remained active in the lives of my children and 14 grandchildren. certified parent in the state of Ohio and responsible for the educational needs of foster children. This has allowed me to stay current with educational and school-related issues. 8 years ago, I stepped back from my role in the Board of Education. I became involved again because of serious concerns about where the district was headed. I was part of a group effort which sought legal action against the current board president to slow down changes in the district during the very uncertain beginnings of the COVID pandemic. Although we did not continue on the path that was pursued, the group remains committed to the financial and educational success of our country. When I was asked to consider running for the board again, my husband said, "Seems to me the house is on fire. Are we going to just watch or are we going to do something about it?" I'm not going to sit back and watch, especially when I feel that things are not right. I always taught my children to get involved and to make change happen. I've chosen to run for the Board of Education because I'm deeply concerned about the divisions within the community regarding the school system, the dire state of the district's finances, and most importantly, the negative impact that both of these have had on the staff and especially the students. I believe that the current board president and council majority is the driving force behind the situation. In order to correct that change must happen. I hope that you'll listen to what reminds us to this evening's questions and answers.
Thank you, Mrs. Pepco. Mrs. Marie Millard, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Marie Millard. I've lived in the Arlington district for 60 years. As a Arlington graduate and mother of 3 graduates, I know what a great education Arlington schools has offered through decades. I have seen the dedication of teachers, administrators, band directors, coaches, and work leaders help Arlington students reach their potential. Because I work as program secretary, I know what an important role they have in the day-to-day operation of the school by providing assistance to the principal, the teachers, parents, and students. As the classified union president, I understood and respected the bus drivers who have the pressure of keeping our kids safe, keeping peace on the buses, and meeting the needs of our children.
That work in our period and order period. My first experience with Arlington education understand the that we feel sometimes to work their children to make sure they get a experience people about work and for their the past 5 years. I work by to the so the fundraising ability is the run is to have a principal experience. Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. Arlington Association Women and students, great opportunity to see up here. Run for I've more about
I'm running for the school board for 2 things. Number one, I'm concerned about the emphasis on education. There's a lot of decisions made, and education is not the focal point of the decisions made at the board level. And then the other issue that is concerned is the financial integrity of the district. We're headed to some tough times ahead with a $2.6 million current fiscal deficit, and we have a $4.7 million loan with these 3 schools being held by the county. So I'm going to talk about that later as the evening goes on, but let me get back to myself. I've been a Marlboro resident for 20 years. I'm married to my wife, Shirley, for 32. We have 8 children, 6 have graduated. We have 2 still at home. One is a freshman at high school, Lucas. And we have our youngest, Rebecca, is a 4th grader at Marlboro. My older kids have gotten great education, great staff, great teachers, great administrators. And I want to see that continue. And one of the things that needs to be done at the board level is an emphasis on education and make sure we have the funds available
now and into the future, continue that. So as the night goes on, I hope to talk about a few ideas I have. I'm running along with Karen Humphreys, Kathy Krupko, and Jonathan Swift, because I think we bring a lot of experience to
Time is up.
Central. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. For clarification, the previous 6 candidates who have just spoken, the previous 6 are running for the 3 open spots for 4-year terms on the school board. And our next 4 candidates will be running for the 2-year term that is yet to be completed. Mr. Luke Powell, you have 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Powell. I've been asked by our audio-visual technicians to ask the candidates to please perhaps pull the microphone towards you and speak directly into it, not so much for people in the audience, but for the people who are maybe watching on YouTube. We thank you for that. Mr. Matt Mish, 2 minutes. Excuse me, we're going to interrupt and we're going to ask you guys if you could maybe take the microphone out of the stand and hold it, and my interruption is not going to count against anyone's time.
Nothing like more pressure. So I guess why you should vote for me. So I'm not part of any political action party. I align myself with nobody. I have no personal agendas. I am one board member of 5 already trying to make solid decisions amongst what we have. Since day one, I reviewed information that's been presented, documentation about certain matters, and then addressing those. Answering and then asking many questions to make solid decisions. I will continue to do this in this manner. No, I offer no one-sided majority voting. I will vote based on facts. Our vote should be a majority vote of a group, not a majority side. I am not influenced by, like I said, by any political action party or any endorsee. I vote to empower families for their children and their well-being for this community. I vote to promote confidence in our faculty. I have been talking with staff and families in the district in order to keep our community to reconnect, and not just one district, and not just one township, but all 3 districts, or all 3 townships into one district. I want to new ideas for
10
people.
seconds.
And I hope to find new ways and ideas to get things to make our children be more competitive with our school education system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mish. Ms. Kathleen Purdy, 2 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Purdy, a second-generation public school retired teacher. Both of my children are graduates here from Marlington High School. The symbol, Marlington Dukes are represented by Duke Bow, the orange Marlington Block M, which I'm wearing on my cap, and the Duke Shield. The 2 diagonal stripes in the shield represent 2 qualities that we want the characters of our Marlington graduates to have: service and integrity. I provide service in the community. I live in Lexington Township. I provide services to the Marlington community when my children were here, as I help to support the back-to-school breakfast from Panera's. 2.5 years ago, I provided that for all 3 of the elementary buildings, our middle school, and our high school, as a way of showing them the appreciation from a teacher's perspective. Yes, I've spent 33 years in education, both as a Title I teacher and as a classified teacher. I'm retired, but I'm not retired from my classroom. I'm serving now on the Ohio Education Association's Retired Advisory Council, representing the teachers that are retired from this district here tonight. I've always tried to make a difference by bringing everything that I can to the table. A teacher's voice, an established senior citizen living on a fixed income and not interested in wasting your money or mine. I sort of like seeing my handprint from results, knowing that if I had not acted, others may not have benefited. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mrs. Purdy. Final candidate, Mr. Jonathan Swift, 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Swift, and I am a lifelong resident, for the most part, of Washington Township. I spent some time out of the district for the last few years, and I'm a 1992 graduate of Marlington High School. I had the privilege of serving on the Board of Education from 2001 to 2005, and have a great deal of respect for those that are up here that would wage a campaign and get involved and want to be the voice for this community, and also the voice for our children. I started thinking about running a couple of years ago when I started watching what was going on here with the Board of Education, and that there's currently a leadership group that is out dividing the community. When I was on the Board of Education, if something wasn't good for the community and all the board members didn't agree on it, we didn't take those kind of issues much farther because we didn't want to divide this community. And we wanted to do what was best for Marlington and education. I've had concerns as I've watched the community be divided, poor fiscal decisions, and ignoring glaring deficits in the education that we have at Marlington. Marlington has slipped to 15th out of 17 schools in Stark County as far as quality education, and dead last in college preparation according to U.S. News and World Report. And those are the kind of things that drive me crazy. And why are we not focused on education? This election is not about buildings and maintenance. This election is about educating our children for the future of Marlington and this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Swift. Okay, we're going to enter the question portion of our program tonight. And many questions were submitted, and we had staff and students combine these questions into 7 compiled questions so that we don't get repetitive with the same question being asked over and over again. We will start. Mrs. Gabriel will have first answer for 1 minute on the first question, and then we'll move left to right. The second question will be Mrs. Humphries, and then we'll move to left to right and then back around. Third question, Mrs. Millard, and then so forth. These are then children random. So we'll start with the first question. This will be for
Mrs. David first, and then we'll move from left to right. You will have 1 minute, and a reminder that there is no crosstalk from candidate to candidate. Okay? Question number 1. In the state of Ohio, the elections for boards of education are intended to be nonpartisan. However, in Marlington Local School District, they have become very partisan, with 2 clear political parties running slightly candidates for seats. One gather versus one by the board so that members feel to vote on issues from if you comment, give them that serve individual always allowing your influence and with comment.
Board member of it has representing my community and do that for as serving the students first and providing them with safe environment and learning facilities. As far as the input from the other board members, of course, we will listen to all those, but it is key that we represent the community, and it is nonpartisan. I believe that. That we do believe in keeping our elementaries. We believe in improving the education, and we believe in expanding the programming and doing what's very best for our staff, our students, and our community.
Thank you. We'll move now to Mr. Horniak, and a reminder that since that was a lengthy question, if anyone needs me to repeat the ending perhaps, I'll be happy to.
The ending would be great, thank you.
What assurances can each of you, especially the 8 running on a common ticket, give the Marlington community that, if elected, you will serve on the board as an individual, always weigh your conscience, and never allow yourself to be influenced by another board member or influence another board member simply because you ran with them on a common political ticket?
That's excellent, thank you. As a military member, I served this country in its interests around the world. I didn't ask when I was told, that this was going to be our mission. The mission was always the people. It was always our interests first and foremost. That has projected through my career right now. I got out of the corporate world and I'm into emergency medical services. When you dial 911, I'll ask male or female because we need to know. But I don't ask what your political affiliation is. I don't ask how you voted. I don't ask. My main purpose is to serve you. My purpose is to show up at your residence in your hour of need, in your time of trial, and to make sure you get the greatest quality of care possible. That's how I feel we should behave on the board. Our interest should always be the community's needs, and we should always be looking out for the greater good, especially of our most valuable resource, which is our students, our children.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mrs. Humphries?
I can only give a response as far as who I'm running with. I wanted to run with them because they are responsible and experienced board members. I saw how they handled past their experiences on the board when I was a reporter. And I admired the fact that they did not always agree, but they put education first and children first. And that's my goal. I can give an example, kind of a situation that we faced when there was a 4-person majority that I was a part of prior to 2020. And it involved a situation in executive session, so I can't share it. But we did not all agree, but we were able to work through that even though we did not agree. So I'm all about balance and looking at the big picture, and I will continue to do that.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. Mrs. Krupko, same question. 1 minute.
I guess the best answer I can give you is with my past experience. I ran with 2 other candidates the first time I ran for the board,
and was at odds with several of the other board members. And through working with them, I learned that you can agree to disagree. But the bottom line is, when you're working for the students, that's where your focus has to stay, and that's what all your decisions are. There is no one board member that acts individually. The board president is allowed to lead and speak on behalf of the other members, but all decisions are made as a group, and there is a general rule of thumb that once the vote is made, whatever the majority on the board decides, you all support each other. In the past, I have voted my conscience. Sometimes I agreed with people, sometimes I didn't, but I always voted my conscience and did what I felt was best for the students and the staff.
Thank you, Mrs. Krepko. Mrs. Millard, same question. Once again, if you need the last part repeated, I will always be happy to do so.
I will always question, discuss respectfully, and vote as I see fit. I feel very comfortable running with Carolyn Gabrick, Jim Horniak, and Luke Cowles, because we do see things pretty much in the same way, but we do not always agree on the same thing. I think the board is there are 5 members, and there are going to be different personalities, and they should always focus on what is important for the students, number one, and the community.
Thank you, Mrs. Millard. Mr. Ryan?
I agree with Maria about what you said with the focus on the students and the education, and there won't be agreements on all issues. I will say, as far as running as a group, it does allow for a lot of shared resources and time. It does take a lot of time to campaign. It does take some financial means to do it, especially at these current times. Running with Karen, Jonathan, and Kathy, we have a lot of discussions on where we sit on issues, where we think the school ought to be headed, and we don't agree. And that's not going to always be the case on the board if we're all elected. We're going to have to compromise, and we're going to have to come to some general agreement that what's best for the kids and move forward.
10 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Cowles, same question.
Well, my intention has always been to serve as an individual on the board, naturally, because I'm just an independent-minded person. So there's no single board member or administrator that's going to sway how I feel or how I vote on any particular issue. Now, do my running mates and I share some common goals? Yes, we do. However, the important thing is we came to those conclusions on our own. And so my reference point will always be the voters, because who are the voters? They're the parents, grandparents, foster parents, older siblings, and aunts and uncles of our students. And they know what's best for their children. And when they speak to us, when they speak to me, I believe them.
Thank you, Mr. Cowles. Mr. Nish?
I believe, as I already said, I always stand by myself. So I don't have one side I belong to, I don't belong to another side. I think that's how we got in trouble in the last 16 years. You see, we went one direction, and then we went to another direction, and now we're physically having a problem, and we had that problem before. I just don't want to see that anymore. It's the reason why I stood up to do this. It's because I'm one individual with one idea, and I wish that some people weren't running against me, because I think we'd have a better way of doing 2 on one side, 2 on the other side, and me in the middle, because that makes a better way of figuring it out. So everyone still gets to decide what they want to say, but ultimately you go by the facts of what they are and how you answer. I'm very disappointed that, I had to run right away about this, because I really feel like I give the best opportunity, because I don't have someone that controls me. That I can do stuff that the community wants to see, and I ask, and I follow through with that
10
stuff.
seconds.
When the community asks me to do something, I follow up to make sure we're good to go. So, thank you much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nish. Mrs. Purdy, same question.
Would you repeat the question,
Certainly.
please?
What assurances can each of you, especially the 8 running on a common ticket, give the Marlington community that, if you are elected, you will serve on the board as an individual, always voting your conscience, and never allowing yourself to be influenced by another board member or attempting to influence another board member simply because you ran with them on a common political ticket?
Thank you for that. One example is last year in March, I heard that there were going to be a rally in support of our superintendent and treasurer. I didn't stop to think, well, whose side is this? I knew that the Alter Care Nursing Home essential workers had just lost their 8th resident. And that's in Lexington Township. That's our family. And I called, and we were able to have donations dropped off during that rally. And we were able to contribute a full van. As a classroom teacher and as a retired teacher and the mother of a military service, I pretty much make my own decisions, not based on what someone else says is the best choice, but what would be right and proper for our diverse community. And thank you for the question.
Mr. Swift, same question.
Thank you for the question. After 20 years in campaigns, politics, and government affairs, it's hard to move me on an issue. I was independent when I was on the board last time, and I will be again. In fact, it's interesting because our opponents have said some things about me in their little orange flyers that just aren't accurate. And one of the reasons that running with the people that I'm running with makes sense to me is because I support 3 community elementary schools. And people have been told otherwise. And that's just not true. Mark, Karen, Kathy, and I can all disagree and still be on the same side, working towards the best education possible for your children. And I'll say that again so no one gets the wrong idea. I support 3 community elementary schools. I went to Washington.
10 seconds.
And we'll keep them open if I'm elected to school board.
Thank you to all candidates for your interest in the first question. I actually misspoke a little while ago in the random drawing for the order of who will answer questions. The second question will be answered first by Mrs. Humphries, and then it will move from the audience's left to right and then back around. Question number 2. The board mission statement says, in collaboration with staff, community, parents, and students, the Marlington Local School District will develop lifelong learners who understand and apply knowledge. If you are a current board member or a past board member, how have you collaborated with staff, community, parents, and students? If you are a potential board member, how would you plan to collaborate with all of these groups? What are the opinions of one group weighted any differently than the others? Mrs. Humphries, and then moving from left to right, 1 minute.
The board sets the tone for the work environment in the district. And we should empower the staff to do their job of educating students to the best of their ability without hindrance from that job. Staff should be able to enjoy free speech, as every other voter, resident, and American should enjoy. They should be allowed to speak up without putting a target on their back. No one who puts a mad face emoji on a Facebook post should get a visit from an administration member sent by the board president to warn them. If the micromanaging goes away, I have no doubt the staff will stay and things will get back on track at Marlington.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. Mrs. Krupko?
It has always been my opinion that an education involves the Board of Education, the administrators, the teachers, the parents, and the students. As a parent, I worked with staff and many times to get the right situation set up for my children. As a member of the board, I spent time in the cafeteria, riding a bus, seeing what all of the different jobs were, and reaching out to teachers and staff members to see what they actually did before I made any of my decisions. I listened to my kids, my children's friends, when they talked about the things that were going on in school. I listened to the community, but ultimately, to create an educational system that works, you have to make the right decisions for what's best for the students and the staff, not because it's the popular decision or what the majority wants.
Thank you, Mrs. Krupko. Mrs. Millard? Sure.
Please.
The board mission statement says, in collaboration with staff, community, parents, and students, the Marlington Local School District will help develop lifelong learners who understand and apply knowledge. If you are a current board member or past board member, How have you collaborated with staff, community, parents, and students? If you are a potential board member, how would you plan to collaborate with all of those groups? And finally, are the opinions of one of those groups weighted any differently than the others?
I think that it is a work in progress for everybody to work together, to collaborate, to discuss things, that no one area or no one person should weigh more in what they feel or how they want to make a decision. I believe that my background in many areas, I've had to do that same type of thing, and with a lot of people, and I think that it is best that everybody work together for what is best for the district, number one, what is best for the students.
Thank you, Mrs. Millard. Mr. Ryan?
I think the best way to answer that question is how to get the community to collaborate is, there's three examples that come to mind right away. A few years back, probably 10, 12 years ago, there was a push for a technology improvement in schools. And that had to do with getting laptops into the hands of the middle school and high school kids. And there was a big push for community involvement. We had some recognizable businesses in the community that had the means and donated and jump-started that. It was a 50-50 proposition. The school kicked in 50%, and I think at the time it was about an $80,000 project. So $40,000 of it came from the community. That's an example of how to collaborate. A couple other examples would be the high school shop renovations. Again, you had community involvement. If you let the superintendent empower him to do his job and encourage him, it can be done.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Cowles?
I think some of the suggestions I would offer for collaboration, I think, would be with staff. I think we need to be more in touch with staff to discover the kinds of courses that teachers are excited to teach, so that students are also excited to take them. I think definitely we need to improve curriculum at Marlington, and staying engaged regularly with staff regarding that issue is an important way to do that. I feel we need to stay in regular contact with the community, not just during election season. So I feel like we need to find ways to keep the community regularly engaged in a participatory way throughout the academic year, so that we can employ more of what they want within the decisions that we're making. And so I think that's essentially important in a way to pull the community together. This will give students a greater voice and also parents at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cowles. Mr. Mish?
Well, since day one, I've been going to all the schools. I know a lot of teachers are seeing me, a lot of families, and talking to family members in the schools and people around me. I'm doing that, trying to communicate, to make three townships into one. And that way we can all work together and do the things we need to do. If we focus on the kids like that, and we can build on their curriculum for the teachers and support them, we can build our curriculum into something that we have not seen here before, to make something a difference in our kids that want to stay here permanently and help us to grow and make our community succeed at all costs. I know years ago that some things like Mr. Ryan had said about, technology and stuff like that. I thought it was a great idea, and it went to the wayside. We need to focus on those things, bring electives back to our students, that way they have a chance to do something, like maybe shop, or other things like solar power. I know I say that a lot, but there's so many new technologies out there that we could do as a community that could do everything to make us grow and keep people in the right way, so that way we can grow as a community. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mish. Mrs. Purdy?
Thank you for the question. As I said earlier, my children, our children, Molden and my children came through these halls of this district. Not only that we always support the teachers and staff, and we send in shrimp trays and Subway lunches and popcorn tins and beverages for the whole staff. Once they graduated, I continued to work on building that community with myself, because as a teacher, I know what it's like to feel underappreciated and what it feels like to feel to be recognized for the hard work that teachers do. So it's very important as a community. Remember, students students don't live in buildings, they live in the community, and they grow up and leave. But when they leave, they have to be able to face the diversity that's out there. And they have to be able to do that with the integrity and the service oriented that comes from our mission statement.
Thank you, Mrs. Purdy. Mr. Swift.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. When it comes to collaboration between the community and staff and the kids, the students that we have here at Marlington, one thing that I would propose if elected to the school board is creating a citizens advisory group made up of farmers, businessmen, parents, teachers. That group could meet once a quarter, get accurate information from the school board directly, and then also give recommendations and at least have their voices heard in a community forum. And we can help bring our community back together to be one united Marlington and move forward with the education of our children.
Thank you, Mr. Swift. Question number 3 will be answered first by Mrs. Millard. My apologies, I forgot that we had to come back around. Mrs. Gabrick, same question, 1 minute.
Board policy requires that the board work through the superintendent to hire the best staff possible for our students, and it's up to the board then to support these decisions in order to give our students the best opportunities. The board brings the vision of the community to the board table to assist the superintendent with these decisions. And we support our students, and I support our students, community, and staff by collaborating, being available for questions and phone calls, comments, and attend multiple community events, and just encourage community input all the way around so that we know what the community does want for this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gabrick. Mr. Hornet, 1 minute, please.
Thank you. Collaboration is difficult. Getting people to work together is always a challenge. But when people do come together, just because we disagree doesn't mean we don't like each other, doesn't mean we disrespect one another. And when we're trying to achieve collaboration, communication is the key. And just like here, we're rushing to try to put out an answer, and it doesn't always come out the way we want, or because we're in a rush. And I would encourage the board, and especially if I was a part of it, it seems to me in watching their interactions, we need to slow down. Is there a need that we have to bust out the answer right now? Did we have to take that vote at the moment? Was there a pressure? Now, there might be. But otherwise, communication is something that has to be worked towards to achieve collaborations. If we're not communicating with one another, if we don't like one another, if we don't like what one another said, we still have to slow down and communicate with one another. Just like in any relationship, this is a relationship. Communication is key.
Thank you, Mr. Hornet. Question number 3 will start with Mrs. Millard and then move left to right, and I will remember to go back around to the beginning. Question number 3, begin with Mrs. Millard. In the fall of 2020, the district and Board of Education received a letter from the Ohio Department of Education regarding the deficit spending in their forecast. Subsequently, the district received $2.2 million last school year in stimulus money from the government, which helped the deficit significantly and pulled the district out of deficit spending this past school year. Without these stimulus funds, the district would have operated in the red by almost $1 million. These stimulus funds were a windfall not likely to reoccur. That being said, what recommendations do you have to eliminate our future deficits? Do you foresee a levy in the near future? If so, how big of a levy? Mrs. Millard, 1 minute.
I did some research on this because I've heard this several times about Marlington being fiscal watch, fiscal emergency. And so I found, and actually this is kind of ironic because I actually talked to the state auditor's office today asking them some questions. They told me Marlington has never been in a fiscal watch, fiscal emergency of any sort. And I do realize that the school districts have been very fortunate with various funds that have been provided that has helped the school districts, which they need, because there's been a lot of different things within the school systems that has funded the money and has also, I mean, COVID has added a lot to that also. I believe that things have been done fiscally responsible, and that we do still have to be diligent about
Thank
how
you,
we
Mrs.
look at
Millard.
things and how we spend things. The money, sorry.
Mr. Ryan, 1 minute, please.
To stave off a budget deficit, it's currently projected at $2.6 million this current fiscal year, and we have deficits projected through the next 2, 3, 4 years. I think one of the things that could pull just an idea, I'm just one person here, but one possibility would be to look at our spending and recognize that a lot of it's been spent on building repairs. How about a permanent improvement levy? If we have enough millage to pay the loan back that the board has undertaken, and also put aside money for the future repairs. We still have a $3.5 million roof at the high school to do, and we have a $500,000 wastewater treatment plant at Lexington to do. Possibly a permanent improvement levy could bring the community together to get these repairs done and keep the 3 buildings that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Cowles, same question.
Well, I believe the question refers to the ESSER funds, and yes, they were a windfall, but they were definitely a beneficial one. I know the school district ended last fiscal year with a balanced budget and a $1.2 million surplus. Now, we have to understand that the current 5-year forecast does not include a new $4 million in ESSER funds that will be received this fiscal year. Now, $800,000 of that has to go to lost learning interventions for students, but that still leaves us with $3.2 million to work with that has more flexible options in how it can be spent. When we couple that with a 1.2 carryover, that leaves us with $4.4 million to work with. That's significant. That's going to change the picture for this fiscal year. And
10 seconds.
So with an administration that's well-versed in how to spend that and does it prudently, we could end up with another balanced budget and modest carryover.
Thank you, Mr. Cowles. Mr. Mish?
Well, I'm already on the board, and I know that at the last meeting we talked about potentially putting a levy on there at the last board meeting, if I remember correctly. When we watched the videos, I think the amount was about $3 million that they were potentially asking for. So everyone knows that we are needing money. Yes, some money we did get from the COVID money did help. We ain't getting COVID money right now. I didn't see that coming my way. I know we've actually had some extra money our way too because we had teachers retire and we didn't replace them. So what do we do about it? Well, that's why I said we need to have more community involvement too, because I might have the answer what I think it is, but we need to have more open community meetings to get this idea, because there's someone out there on video and someone out here in this chair that has an idea how to do this. Not just like one group and another group, but we have to come together as each of us townships that we are, because we have the idea to solve this problem together. You know, that's how I pull good ideas from everyone to make a good, solid decision. So that's where I come from, and that's where I'm going to try to continue to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mish. Mrs. Purdy?
Thank you. The Morganton treasurer, who must do a 5-year forecast twice a year, we're very fortunate that we participate in the Ohio checkbook. So all of you there, even if you're not familiar with how to use a computer, have your children or grandchildren show you how to go on the Ohio checkbook website. The forecast in 5 years show that we will be at a deficit of $1.6 million. As I said earlier, I live on a state teacher's retired pension. I'm not interested in wasting money. My husband worked for 38 years, paid into Social Security, died from leukemia, and I can't get 1 penny of what he paid into the system. I am not in favor of wasting money and putting levies on, of which will not be supported by the people who's using common sense in this district. Go on the Ohio checkbook, check it out yourself.
Thank you, Mrs. Purdy. Mr. Swift?
Could you actually ask that question again? I think it doesn't sound like some people answered that question, especially about the levy portion.
In the fall of 2020, the district and board received a letter from the Ohio Department of Education regarding the deficit spending in their forecast. Subsequently, the district received $2.2 million last school year in stimulus money from the government, which helped the deficit significantly and pulled the district out of deficit spending this past school year. Without these stimulus funds, the district would have operated in the red by almost $1 million. These stimulus funds were a windfall, but not likely to reoccur. That being said, what recommendations do you have to eliminate our future deficits? Do you foresee a levy in the near future? And if so, how big of a levy?
Well, I was on the board last time we passed a levy. It's been that long ago. And Marlington has been prudent with its funds, but it's really disingenuous and irresponsible to say that we're in a good financial position right now. The ESSER windfall funds are COVID funds. So everybody out here got a $1,400 check from the government this year, and you spent it on, I don't know what, I bought new tires for my car with mine. You know, and when we're in that situation, those are one-time expenses that are covered by a one-time payment. It was never intended to continue to move the school board. And in fact, if it weren't for the ESSER fund, we wouldn't have this budget windfall of $1.2 million that people keep talking about. In fact, it wouldn't be there at all. We'd be operating in the black if we did not receive the ESSER funds. So it's also irresponsible to tell people in the district that the financial picture is good when 4 weeks from now, we're going to have to announce that we're going out for a tax
Mr.
levy.
Swift. Mrs. Gabrick, same question.
The district is not under any financial distress as legal by the state. The deficit spending began under Mr. Ryan's leadership and continued for 5 years. Fiscal year 2022 shows a positive cash balance of nearly $5 million. This forecast was prepared without the $4 million ESSER 3 COVID relief funds that are now being received, and it was also prepared without the projected annual cost reductions of $400,000 that Dr. Schruffler and Dr. Main said they would be able to institute. At this time, I cannot say whether we would need a levy at this point or not. We do not have an updated 5-year forecast with this accurate information. And as recent as the last board meeting, Dr. Schruffler could not tell us the specifics of what he needs the money for. I understand that nearly 20 years is a long time to go without receiving new operating funds, but I will not ask for a levy until more information can be provided, and I'm convinced that it will be right once we have more information. The board and administration need to demonstrate that they are being frugal with your tax dollars and not just asking for money without first reducing expenses.
Thank you, Mrs. Gabrick. Mr. Horniak?
As far as budgets and spending and levies, obviously we have to review, we have to be open, we have to spend wisely. I think too, as far as my last comment with communication as well, we can't exaggerate. We can't have my numbers and your numbers. We can't have differences like that. We have to say, are these the numbers? The first place to start is agreeing that we have a common set to work from, and then move on from there without fear or spin or my opinion or your opinion. Transparency, accuracy, and truthfulness has to be apparent in our numbers. So as far as a levy goes, I mean, what for? And what is it going to be specifically about? We just can't say, yes, we need money, get us some. So we do need specifics. We need a good review. We need a good budget and a good plan, and we need to act on it.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Humphries, same question.
The levy was discussed in the April, June, August, September, and October board meetings. The best place to get information is to watch those board meetings. Regarding the 5-year forecast, that's a document that constantly changes, and that's the thing you'll find if you get involved at all with finances and with the school district. Things are constantly changing. You have funding things that change because you have students coming and going, and now that number has changed monthly. It used to be yearly, now it's monthly, that the state of Ohio wants to know how many students you have. They call them butts in seats. So things are constantly changing, and the reason for the levy that has been suggested is operating. It's an operating levy, which means that is what pays teachers.
10 seconds.
And if we don't have teachers, we don't have a school.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. Mrs. Krupko, same question.
The COVID money, the COVID bailout, was used over the last year to pay for the staff, and all of that information is listed in the assumptions that the treasurer makes when she puts together, or he puts together, the 5-year forecast. It is based on their experience, the best guess at what the finances will be. Things like federal grants, the ESSER funds, the Nexus money never show up on the 5-year forecast. You're supposed to be balancing your budget based on the money you actually have, not windfalls. I know there's been talk about levies. To be honest with you, I don't know what I would recommend and what I would do at this point, because the numbers have changed so many times. I would want to spend a lot of time listening to the treasurer and the superintendent, getting their best advice.
10 seconds.
And proceeding from that direction after a lot of discussion with other board members.
Thank you, Mrs. Krupko. We now move on to the fourth question. And the fourth question will be led off by Mr. Cowles. Question number 4. Since the start of 2020, there have been more than 25 resignations of employees in the Marlington Local School District, of which at least 6 were administrators. This is one of Marlington's highest years of turnover ever. Obviously, turnover in employees is disruptive educationally, financially, and emotionally to the staff, students, and parents. What recommendations do you have to help with retaining employees going forward at Marlington Local School District? Mr. Cowles, 1 minute.
Well, as far as retaining staff, I think people leave positions for lots of reasons. So I think you need to ask those people why they're leaving the district. And then you have to move on from there and figure out what needs to be changed. I think in a lot of situations with staff that have left the district, it's a difference of philosophy. We had a changeover in the board majority in 2020, and I think they have a different philosophy than some of the administrators who have left. And it's common practice, I think, even in any business, when you have new management come in, they have a new direction that they're taking the company or the institution. And a lot of times when your personal philosophy doesn't fit with that, people move on to another location that fits with their current beliefs. So I think in order to retain people, we need to stay in communication with them and find out specifically why they're leaving so we can institute changes to retain them. It's about communication and keeping an ongoing dialogue happening.
Thank you, Mr. Cowles. Mr. Mish?
I do believe it is about communication. I agree with that. That's why it's so important to talk to the staff, to see what the teachers are doing, what's going on, why they want to leave. I notice that we thank them for their service, but I don't really see reasons why they leave when we have our meetings. And those are questions that need to happen, to see what we can do to make those changes. We do that in any other job in the real world that we all have. They ask why you have an exit interview, just find out what's going on. I'd love to see what those comments are, to see what's happening. The most important is if we empower our teachers to do the right things for the students, they will bring more people back to see that we have teachers that are empowered to do things, and other people are going to see that and want to come back. If we can open this up to the community so they can see what's happening, people will come back to our community and teach again. I really think it's just a matter of showing that we don't have one-sidedness. I think our biggest issue has been the one-sided issues, and if we can show that it's not one-sided, we're working toward a common goal, people will come back to our community and make a difference in it.
Thank you, Mr. Mish. Mrs. Purdy?
Thank you. I'm a delegate. I represent 3 million teachers today. 3 million teachers. Last night, I was at a county meeting, and I listened to teachers talk about what needs to change. Morale is low in a lot of the districts, and it's because of the ability not to communicate with their principals, their administrators. Oftentimes, parents are what we need to understand what we're doing, but it also keeps us on our toes. In order to retain good teachers and engaging teachers, you have to have a strong school board. You have to have a diverse community, and every school board should represent their community. Single moms, single dads, farmers, suburban, widows. Your diversity of the community school board drives the program forward.
Mr. Swift, same question.
Thank you for the question, by the way. I've actually done something that it doesn't sound like anybody up here has done. I've actually talked to teachers that have left the district. And I've talked to teachers that are still in the district. There's been, with some of them, I can't speak for all of them, but the ones that I've talked to have left the district because they feel micromanaged, they feel bullied by the school board leadership, and they feel like they don't have an opinion that can be spoken and heard here at Marlington. These people are residents, they are parents, they are teachers. We don't just hire teachers who come through this district as a stepping stone to get somewhere else. They come because of the environment. And if the environment is not friendly and welcoming and is one of intimidation and fear, we will not get good teachers and we will not be able to keep the teachers that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Swift. Mrs. Gabriel, same question.
It's my opinion that we should work to hire people that truly want to work here and understand our community and our way of life. And we should seriously consider promoting our staff from within rather than looking outside when we have a position that's open. We need to make Marlington a very attractive place to work for our staff and improve our communication with all of them. We just need our staff to know that we all need to work on overall support for them from our administration, from our board, and from our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gabriel. Mr. Horniak?
The resignations are a tough thing. I mean, and like we said, why? Why did they leave? I know the teacher personally who left because the spouse was in another district with another schedule. So that doesn't reflect negatively on our district, and it just drives the fact that there are many different reasons to go. However, again, a theme of communication here, we definitely need to find out why. And we can't change everything. Every time somebody says they left for a particular reason, we can't say, oh my gosh, we're going to make an adjustment to our operations to accommodate that. But we can find out what the reason was and if there is anything that can mitigate that circumstance. And is it something that's widespread throughout our teachers and our staff corps? That can be something, the wider spread it is, the more we can address it. But again, we have to know why they're leaving. We have to find out what the issue is and then adjust and solve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mrs. Humphrey, same question.
Well, Mr. Swift, I have talked to other teachers too, so I'm the other one up here that did, or staff leaving. Having a relationship with staff this is why it's important. Because if someone feels that you're on their side, even if you don't always agree, or even if they don't always get what they want or are hoping for, you work together, they know you know each other. That's why the relationship within the school is important. And specifically the ones that I know, and they are numerous, I can't give you an exact number, but it's not just one here or there. They don't feel safe in their positions. They feel that they get targets put on their back if they hold a different viewpoint and speak out than the board leadership. That should be so. That's bullying right there. Also, you would have to ask why 150 students left, in the last couple of years. That's another issue, and it's because of the instability that's been created since January 2020.
Mrs. Krupka, same question.
It's a lot of resignations and a lot of turnover. The board sets the tone for what goes on in the school district. They hire the treasurer and the superintendent. The superintendent and the treasurer set up the work environment. People stay in a good work environment. I am the third one who has spoken to teachers who have left, and they have left because of a negative work environment. They do not feel respected. They don't feel like the leadership is behind their efforts to teach our kids. We've talked about working together. There was a question earlier about partisanship and everybody working only with people with the same opinion. Well, if you disagree with the board, you should be able to voice that opinion without feeling threatened by doing so. And you just have to have a communicative environment where people are willing to listen to each other and respect each other.
Thank you, Mrs. Krupka. Mrs. Millard.
I think there can be a lot of reasons why people leave the district. It does sound like there's a large number that have left for other positions. Sometimes it's better working opportunities, it's more money. It can be a position that they may feel that they wouldn't be chosen for here at Marlington. I have also talked to some staff who have left and have been in this district for a lot of years, and it was kind of discouraging to hear them say that they did not feel respected. It had nothing really to do with the board, but they had applied for positions and they had worked here for many years, but yet people from outside the district who had not put the time in and the dedication in were chosen. So I do believe that it is important from the board's perspective, but also the superintendent and the administration to be sure of why they are leaving and to try to correct any problems that they can resolve.
Thank you, Mrs. Millard. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. I've also talked to some staff and teachers, as many others have, about why they've left. And what I can say is it all starts at the top. The board leadership sets the tone. The primary duties of the board, school board, is to hire your superintendent and your treasurer. Those are the two most important positions in the district because they run the district. You empower those people to do their job, and then you get out of the way and let them do it. You don't micromanage them. When that happens, with the proper direction and the proper goal setting, superintendent is going to hire the best people, and not necessarily within the district. You're not going to always have the best people for a particular position within the district.
10 seconds.
But you empower your administrators, your superintendent to hire the best people. That will boost morale.
Thank you. Question number 5 will begin with Mrs. Purdy. Question number 5. If Marlington Local School District would get into a financial situation, an extremely bad financial situation, would you consider closing any elementary school to prevent state intervention and keeping Marlington soundly open?
Thank you for the question. And I want to use some of my time to reflect. When we say teachers, we also need to include the staff. A school cannot exist without bus drivers, without a custodian who cleans the buildings for the health and safety of our children, as well as the cafeteria ladies. So when we talk about teachers, we actually mean our paraprofessionals as well. Would I consider closing one of the buildings? That's a hard question. Just depends on the budget. It depends on if the money is not there. It sounds like if the money's not there, would you close one of the buildings? I'm not sure. It depends on which building would be closed and how we would go about that. But then we have to think about the reduction of staff. I'm a lifetime member of the OEA, and I would advocate that once you lose staff, and then you're losing your ability to continue to formulate your community.
Mr. Swift, same question.
The answer is no. I wouldn't consider closing 3 elementary schools. I think it's in our community's best interest to have those schools in those communities representing each of the 3 townships. I also want to say that things are going to get worse. You know, one of the things we haven't discussed tonight is the fact that the financial picture of Marlington is so bad that in June of 2023, less than 20 months from now, will be the last day we can make payroll. The last day we can make payroll is June 2023. So with that in mind, we're going to need a levy, and I don't want to close buildings with having people, and I want to ask the community in a unified way to support the operating levy that is coming down the road. It sounds like people here are just living in another reality.
Thank you, Mr. Swift. Mrs. Gabrick, same question.
When Marlboro was closed, the savings only amounted to approximately $200,000 a year, and it just was not enough to cut off 1/3 of our township residents. Our students did not comfortably fit into 2 buildings, and to keep our 3 township elementaries is a benefit to our students, our staff, and our community, our parents, everyone. I would not consider closing elementary school. We need to look at other options, which would be to look at all of our other expenses, see where we can cut back on expenses, see where revenue can be generated, look at grants, look at all other options before I just wouldn't consider closing elementary school.
Thank you, Mrs. Gabrick. Mr. Horniak?
A community is made up of homes, businesses, churches, and schools in general. It's like a four-legged stool. If you start kicking those legs out from under the community, the fabric starts to fall apart. So when a community gets into trouble, or the school district is in trouble, to say, are we going to go and start eliminating these institutions from our community, it tears apart at the community. No, I wouldn't support a hastily decided upon closure of any of our community institutions. But again, communication with healthy debate, disagreement, discussion, and accurate, honest numbers that are placed in front of us all so that we can say, these are the facts. This isn't my emotion, this isn't my greater feeling, but this is the fact and this is the best for the community. That's what would drive the decision on what changes need to be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Mrs. Humphries?
I agree that you have to look at all the factors to make your decision. Our first indication of how things will go is this levy that is supposed to be on the ballot in May. Again, it's been discussed, it's been advocated, and I think one example I heard someone say is, could you live on what you made in 2004? Marlington hasn't had a raise since 2004. So that's a really difficult thing to live on. So the first indication of community support for those buildings will be if a levy passes. Because if you want to have the same amount of buildings open with about half the students that we used to have, you have to be able to support that. You know, each student represents money in funding from the state. So you have to be able to make that money up somewhere. So I think that would be a real good indication of what's going to happen in the future. We have to look at all the information at the time.
Thank you, Mrs. Humphries. Mrs. Krupko?
It would be irresponsible for the board not to look at all the options placed in front of them. I agree with Mrs. Humphries that a big indicator is if everybody wants their 3 buildings, then we need to see the community support, and that can very well mean a levy. It's almost going to be essential to keep these going. We had 11 empty classrooms at Marlboro this year. That tells you there's not a physical need for 3 buildings. The board is going to have to take a look at all of those options, all of the funding. They're going to have to put together a big picture, present it to the community, get some input from the community in terms of voting for or against levies, and talk to the superintendent, the treasurer, and see what options are out
10
there
seconds.
to keep the buildings open if that is what the community wants.
Thank you, Mrs. Krupko. Mrs. Millard?
This is a tough question. I think the one thing is you have to look to see why we're having an issue with a dire financial situation, how we got there. You have to look at all aspects of why that occurred. You have to, as a board, you're going to have to probably make some tough decisions. Personally, right now, I can't see closing an elementary, but like I said, you have to really look at the entire situation and see if that is part of funding cuts that could help put the district back in good order with finances. But I will say that for a district to be in dire financial situation, if you research on the Ohio Department of Education, that is, there's a lot to that. That is not a real quick process that happens.
Thank you, Mrs. Millard. Mr. Ryan, same question.
Would I vote to close the building now? No, I would not. It's obvious why you wouldn't, because we have spent an exorbitant amount of money into these buildings, and the repairs are in various stages. We've got a $4.7 million loan with the local bank, which holds deeds on the 3 buildings. So you can't close a building now, you can't close any buildings until that loan is paid. We have a $500,000 wastewater treatment plant that is in dire need of replacement soon at Lexington. And we have a $3.5 million roof at the high school that has been postponed for at least 2 years.
10 seconds.
The levy talk started long in the spring, so it's nothing new. I believe a permanent improvement levy could rally the community together to pay for the current repairs and those in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Cowell, same question.
Yes, I don't think I would close the school. I certainly wouldn't, as a matter of fact, because you have to consider the costs to staff and students as well. The staff would certainly lose their jobs because staff are 80% of the operating expenses of the entire budget for the school district. And in any building, they are 80% of the operating expenses for that individual school. So in order to save any money, you would have to have reductions in force with some staff. Those are the tough calls. But when Marlboro was closed, there were no RIFs. The board didn't make the tough call. Virtually everyone who worked in that school was assigned elsewhere in the district. So if we're talking about really saving money, we were still paying for the staff of 3 schools when only 2 were open. So we didn't really save any money. So you've got to make those tough decisions. And I think there are other places in the budget we can cut. The superintendent suggested $400,000, and I look forward to the details on that because they haven't been discussed yet.
Thank you, Mr. Cowles. Mr. Mish.
It's not my place to shut down the community's buildings. They voted to have them, that's why we're not, we need to keep them up to par. And we make sure that we can find ways to be open to suggestions from both sides to make a better decision for the community and the students. Because again, it's got to focus on their curriculum. And if we're going to do cuts and cuts and cuts and cuts, and all it does is cut out the kids' curriculum, we're going to be a hot mess still, and no one's going to grow. And we're not going to get anywhere. It's hard to articulate everything. Everyone that has been saying on this board is everything's been in my head the whole night, and it's really frustrating. The key thing is our kids. If we can focus on what we got to do with these kids to make sure they're situated, buildings or no buildings, COVID hit, we had kids at home. That's what buildings don't matter. We had to teach at home, but what's important is what we teach the kids with that fills those buildings full. And the teachers have the tools they need to make it work. That's what we have to focus on. If that ends up being a levy, that's the community's decision to make that decision about it, to have it or not.
Thank you, Mr. Mish. Folks, we've now reached the time designated as the end of the question and answer session, and we're going to move now into the closing statement portion of the program. Each candidate will be allowed up to 90 seconds to deliver a closing statement. We will do the closing statements in reverse order from the opening statements. So we will now start with Mr. Swift. 90 seconds, closing statement, please.
I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's been a pleasure to see all of you and answer these questions. You know, a couple years ago when I started talking to residents and going door to door and finding out what their concerns were about the district, you know, I was troubled by poor financial decisions that were being made at our board, putting our district in a situation where we're going to have an operating levy. And that's not something that I approach lightly, and it's not something that I approached lightly in the past as a board member. Creating a community atmosphere and possibly a community advisory group to help with the schools and give input for every reach of the community is essential moving forward and bringing unity back to Marlington and continuing to focus on our children and what's best for them. I'm passionate about strengthening Marlington for our children's future, maintaining fiscal discipline, and keeping our kids safe at school, creating the right environment to return to excellence in education here at Marlington. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Swift. Mrs. Purdy?
Hi, I'm Kathleen Purdy. I would be honored to receive your support in voting for me, the only teacher voice on the board. Also as the most qualified and a pro-education candidate. In 2011 was the SB 5 push, and that was to try to end collective bargaining for firefighters, nurses, teachers, and I help, in this picture here, I help hold the line. We're going to need more advocacy down at the State House, talking to our legislators. That's something I'm very comfortable with, have always experienced, being able to communicate the needs of our education field. Without education, no doctors or lawyers or plumbers are going to exist. People decide to move into a community based on their schools. Right now, with the infighting that's going on this school board, people are even asking me, why would you want to run for the school board? Because it's just a mess out there. And I said, because I have the courage and I can. Meaning I can because I have the wisdom and the common sense. My passion is
10
teaching.
seconds.
And it took me 14 years to get my undergrad with one husband, 2 children, 1 dog, and I was successful. So I have to integrity, service, and willing to be committed to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Purdy. Mr. Mish?
Tough to follow that, thanks, Mr. Purdy. But I just want to tell you thank you for coming out here. I know I'm already doing this job that everyone keeps saying they want to do. I'm already doing it. I'm up here doing it every day, going to schools as much as I can, talking to the community, listening to what they're trying to say, and be open. I'm trying to work with 2 different sides and take their opinions and go with that and listen and be open. So that way we can make a difference for our kids. Again, it's about the kids. Money, everything. If we focus on how we're going to make it and sustain for them, we can't go wrong. And I'm already doing that. And it's just, it is disturbing to know that we have to go back to majority votes, majority of this, majority of that. A board is made up of the voting should be based on a majority vote of a group of individuals, not one side one way and one side another way. You know, and I offer that, and I've been offering that, and both sides already saw that, but now I'm not good enough, and that's not true. You know, and I have welcomed anyone. My house is across the street. You know, my wife's gonna be mad upset about that, but my house is across the street. You can come and knock on the door and tell me what you want to feel like. And from today on till even when this election's over, I intend to be in that building, every building, from December to January, doing what I'm doing now. I'm here to, I'm boots on the ground and make a
10
difference,
seconds.
and that's all I intend to do. And I hope for your support. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Cowles?
A while back, someone asked me, what are you going to do to heal the district? The truth is, I can't heal the district. I'm one person. What I can do is serve on a board that treats all members with mutual respect, that operates in a collaborative and cohesive way. And in doing that, we can lead by example in the hope that those values are then reflected in our community. But at that point, it becomes an individual choice for all of us. You have to want it. You have to want it more than a social media post. You have to want it more than repeating something you're not absolutely sure is true. You have to want it more than the drama that was formed into this district not that many years ago. So I'm here to say, no matter how this election turns out, I plan on doing my part. And I hope you'll do your part too. Because it's only when we're all leading by example that we're really serving our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan?
Well, thank you to the MEA, Amy Coleman, the student council, Nash Miner, and his crew, Kurt. Thank you for the evening tonight. Hope this was informative for folks. I'm running for board again because I do have a personal stake in this. I do have 2 children still in the district, and I want to see the district continue the education that my older children had. And I think we can do that. The ship is not sunk yet. We can turn this around. And I think the 2 things that can rally the community together is, number 1, the education is the focal point of the board. Decisions being made have to be considered on how it impacts education. And number 2 is the fiscal integrity of the district. Are we really watching the money being spent and how it impacts the education of our kids? Those 2 things, I think the group that I'm running with, we all agree on that principle, those 2 principles, and I think we can bring some change to to the board, we can bring change to the district at the board level, and we can bring the community together based on those two things. So I hope to get your support on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Millard?
First of all, I want to thank the MEA Association for this opportunity this evening for all of us to get together and share our views. I believe that school board members are locally elected public officials entrusted with governing a community's public schools. The role of the school board is to ensure that school districts are responsive to the values, beliefs, and priorities of their communities. A school board has a symbolic role as well. The behavior a board demonstrates at public meetings, how well they work as a team, and the relationships that members have with the district staff, administrators, and families add up to the climate of a community's public education. School systems are complex and require many types of leadership to function properly. One of the primary sources of guidance and leaderships in a school system is the school board. Along with the superintendent, the school board works to make sure the school has all the resources it needs to serve its students effectively. I want the Marlington Board of Education to show respect, unity, dignity, and professional conduct as guidelines to focus on the progress for our students. I am ready to serve on the board and would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Millard. Mrs. Krupko?
I also would like to thank the MEA, the Marlington staff and students, and all of you, virtually and in person, for taking time out of your evening to be here. I entered my first position, my first term on the board during a very divisive time in the school district, and know personally that it is possible to pull this group back together. It's my fervent hope that you'll take the information that you received this evening and consider it very carefully. This election is not about buildings as much as it is about the very survival of Marlington as a district and community. The Board of Education serves as a team, not as an individual, and as leaders of this district. It will take a team that includes the staff, students, parents, and non-parents to make Marlington a full community once again. Please understand that your vote's critical to the very existence of Marlington. You have the ability to make things happen. Where this district lands is ultimately your choice.
Thank you. Mrs. Humphries?
I would sum it up in two key principles: education first and fiscal responsibility second. I'm one who believes that actions speak louder than words. I encourage the community to not only listen to what every candidate says with their words, but find out what their actions have said. Ask yourself if the candidate you plan to vote for has a vision for education. After all, we're candidates for Marlington's Board of Education. Ask yourself if they've demonstrated financial care for the whole Marlington community, including residents and voters, students and staff. Find out if they have a caring connection to Marlington, demonstrated by having volunteered time, energy, and money to the district. Find out if they've developed mutually respectful relationships with staff, parents, and students while leading by example. This spring, when I was asked if I was going to run for re-election, my answer was, I don't know. Since January 2020, the financial and leadership missteps that the board majority took, they've taken the district to the edge of an alarming financial crisis. Our very future is in jeopardy. But when I learned that Kathy, Mark, and Jonathan were willing to step back into the fray to help, I had hope, and it gave me courage to run again. It's inspiring to realize that they are willing to step back in for the sake of Marlington. Please, for the sake of Marlington, vote for Krupko, Ryan, Swift, and Humphries. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horniak?
Thank you all for this opportunity. And I do want to say that experience is important, but it has to be experience that leads to the results that you want and that is the best for our students' needs. I want to see respect, dignity, and positive interaction return to the board and its interactions, and not just talk of spreadsheets and numbers. There's been talk around concerning trouble and deficits, and I frankly think exaggeration. as far as how dire the situation is, I still think we're an excellent community. I look around and I still think we're not on the brink. You are excellent teachers, you are excellent parents, you are excellent neighbors. We just have to make sure that, and what I hope is that you'll vote to assemble the best team to give you a voice in the school system that you want. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Mrs. Gabriel.
I want to thank everyone for the opportunity tonight. There has been a lot of focus on buildings to be able to get our students safe and comfortable facilities. But it's now time to move forward. Buildings are secondary. What is most important is that we have great teachers and staff for improved programming and curriculum to meet the overall needs of our students. Dr. Scheffler recently announced that the curriculum has been neglected in recent years at Marlington. Both Dr. Scheffler and Mrs. Cayley have great credentials in the field of curriculum, and I support their efforts to improve programming, curriculum, and achievement for all of our students. It is a pleasure to be running with Jim, Marie, and Luke, who share common goals. We are all committed to representing the voters and developing a shared vision based on community's desires for the responsible spending and student success in all areas of educational offerings. If elected, we will continue to make these vital principles the foundation of school board decisions so Marlington progresses into an even brighter future based on our successes of the last 2 years. There are many wonderful things happening at Marlington, and I look forward to accomplishing new goals in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Gabriel. How about a big round of applause for all 10 of our candidates running for Marlington School Board. That concludes our program for this evening. We'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and hopefully the countless number of folks watching digitally this evening. We wish everybody a nice evening.